Welcome back to the deep dive. For too long, the national conversation has been kind of stuck in the same loop, right?
Yeah.
Identifying and analyzing how divided we are.
Over and over again.
Exactly. So today, we're breaking free. Our deep dive is shifting focus entirely. We are not here to diagnose the sickness anymore. We are here to pull out the operating manual.
A roadmap.
A complete roadmap for forging a new reality through deliberate, even revolutionary cultural shifts.
And that is such an essential shift in perspective, especially for leaders or really anyone who feels, frustrated by the current state of affairs. We're looking beyond the small fixes.
The incremental stuff.
Right. This is about high-level foundational strategies you need to actually mitigate societal decline. And that requires a holistic look at everything: mission, values, processes, technology, and the human element that has to buy into it all.
I love that framing. It put the power back in our hands, makes us participants, not just spectators. And the sources, they make this really clear distinction between two types of change.
They do.
There's the evolutionary change, which is, the gradual adjustments, the slow bend of the curve. And then there's revolutionary change.
Which is a fundamental foundational shift, a complete redesign. And that second one, the revolutionary kind, that's what's required when the evolutionary tweaks have failed for too long.
And it all comes back to that Peter Drucker quote, right?
The best way to predict the future is to create it. But to create it, you first have to be really honest about the ground you're standing on.
And what's fascinating is the context the sources lay out for us. I mean, the environment of uncertainty we're in, it's just intense.
It really is.
You see it everywhere. Escalating individual diversity, socio-political division that just seems to get worse every year.
The proliferation of subgroups, too.
Yes, carving out smaller and smaller identities. Then you have social media skewing reality, new technologies disrupting everything, shifting social norms. It's a lot.
And what all that points to is not just complexity, but a fundamental lack of focus among our leaders on genuine unity, on collaborative problem solving.
They're managing today's crisis.
Exactly, but they aren't proactively building the platform for tomorrow's cohesion.
And that lack of proactive building, that leads us right into the symptoms. We have to start by recognizing the telltale signs that a society is entering a real period of decline.
It's an unsettling thought.
It is, but it's not theoretical. I mean, civilizations crumble. We've seen it with the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Romans, and even more recently, the Soviet Union or the British Empire.
And the sources stress a critical point here. It's rarely a sudden collapse. It begins with clear, identifiable whispers long before it becomes a scream.
So we need to listen for those whispers. The sources lay out this whole list of indicators. Let's start at the government level. Political instability.
Right.
Which often starts subtly, like bureaucratic overload. Things just get clogged, systems slow down. And eventually that turns into weak governance, social unrest, a breakdown of law and order.
And that political instability, it's almost always fueled by economic problems. We're talking about things like unsustainable debt, inflation that just eats away at your quality of life, massive trade imbalances.
When the economic contract feels broken, the social contract is right behind it.
Almost immediately.
And that economic strain, it leads us to the social indicators, and this is where it gets really concerning. Extreme social stratification.
Yeah.
Not just, some people are richer than others. We're talking about a stark, seemingly unbridgeable divide between a tiny elite and a marginalized majority. That sense that the rules only work for a few, it just poisons everything.
And maybe most alarmingly, you see the corrosion of social cohesion. The trust, the shared values, it just disappears. And that leads directly to adversity, hate, conflict, because people can't see themselves as part of the same team anymore.
The sources also point to a decline in cultural and moral values.
Yeah.
Now, I want to push back on that a bit because that can sound really subjective.
That's a fair challenge, and the sources don't really define it through, individual piety or something.
Okay. They define it through collective self-interest winning out over the common good. It's when the whole system starts to incentivize selfishness.
So you see it when governments consistently prioritize their own needs, or the needs of the elite, over the welfare of the people.
Exactly. And that breeds complacency in the public, because why would you participate in a system you feel is broken? And that just sets the stage for some internal or external conflict to deliver the final blow.
That makes the list feel much less subjective. The symptoms are clear, but how do we understand the trajectory? The sources bring in two classic models for this.
Yeah, we start with Arnold Toynbee's theory of civilization. This is the first big model. Toynbee basically says civilizations are dynamic. They grow or decline based on how they respond to big challenges.
If they're creative, they grow. If they fail, they decline. Simple as that.
Pretty much. And he lays out 5 stages. First is Genesis, where the group is born from adversity, all united by a shared vision.
Then you get growth. That's the good part, successful adaptation, innovation. But then pressures build up, and you enter what he calls troubled times. This is where things start to stall. If you don't fix those troubles, you hit the universal state.
And the universal state is the key one, isn't it?
It is absolutely critical. It's often a peak of power, but it's focused on dominance and short-term gains, not long-term adaptability. It's the moment the civilization thinks it's invincible.
The peak before the fall. And if that arrogance persists, you eventually hit disintegration, the final decline.
Precisely.
That universal state, I mean, that's the one that should really give us pause right now. The idea that peak power could actually be a sign of rigidity, not resilience.
And if Toynbee gives us the map of the cycle, then Lawrence M. Miller's model, Barbarians to Bureaucrats, gives us the human component.
The leadership archetypes that drive us through those stages. It's a stunningly accurate predictor of, well, organizational rot.
It is. He identifies 7 stages. You start with the prophet, who has the compelling new vision, the founder.
Then you need the barbarian, the one who aggressively implements that vision, cuts through the red tape.
Right, the doer. Then comes the builder, who focuses on goals, and the explorer, who drives expansion and innovation. Everything is focused outward. But then, to manage the scale, the administrator arrives.
Bringing order, process, efficiency, all necessary things.
It's necessary, but here's where the danger starts. If the administrator is left unchecked, the systems harden. Order becomes obstruction. And this creates the bureaucrat.
Where the rules and regulations just stifle everything. The goal isn't the best result anymore. It's, did we follow the policy?
The process becomes the mission. And finally, when the whole thing is completely rigid, you end up with the aristocrat.
An autocratic leader focused on self-interest, protecting their position. They're just extracting value, not creating it.
And the critical insight here is that you need all of those types in balance to stay dynamic. If you let the aristocrat take over, you are basically guaranteeing Toynbee's disintegration phase.
And the sources give a cautionary tale for this. Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC.
Oh, it's a perfect example.
The founder, Ken Olsen, was the ultimate prophet. Disrupted IBM, built this huge, successful company, but he clung too tightly to his original vision.
He was unwilling to become the explorer again.
Exactly. And that inability to shift was fatal. DEC completely missed the personal computer revolution, which was being pioneered right under their noses at Xerox PRC. Olsen, the prophet, he became the chief obstacle.
His vision became his cage.
And it led directly to DEC's decline in acquisition. Such a powerful lesson.
So connecting this back, where do the sources suggest we are now? Well, they make a pretty stark assessment.
They do.
That society may be sitting squarely in Toynbee's universal state, heading toward disintegration, and led by what Miller would call the aristocrat.
That is a stark assessment. And it forces us to the crossroads. What are the options? The sources say we have to set aside wishful thinking and look at 4 clear paths.
The first one is the easiest and maybe the most dangerous: complacency, just hoping for evolutionary changes to fix revolutionary problems, waiting for some kind of intervention.
The path of inaction. Second is personal responsibility. This is the internal, work-increasing self-awareness, empathy, trying to foster a more tolerant society from the ground up.
Third is political action, actively using your voice, your vote, to demand leadership that prioritizes unity. Maybe even supporting a third party of moderates to break the gridlock.
And then there's the drastic option, revolt or revolution, forcing fundamental change.
And this raises a really critical point that people often misunderstand: the true distinction between a revolt and a revolution. They are not the same thing.
Not at all. The sources are clear. A revolt is localized, it's short-term, it has limited goals. Think of the January 6th insurrection, a specific uprising at a specific event.
Or the George Floyd protests, or the Capitol Hill Occupy protest. They're spontaneous, often leaderless, and they can be suppressed or just fizzle out because they don't have a blueprint for a new system.
Whereas a revolution aims for a comprehensive, lasting transformation of the entire society. It's not about stopping one problem, it's about rebuilding the whole thing.
Like the American Revolution or the Civil War. The goal was a fundamental structural change.
And we should remember, revolutions aren't always political.
Right.
The information age, the Industrial Revolution, those were comprehensive, lasting transformations of society.
A great point. But if we choose that path of profound change, we have to be so careful not to just replace one aristocrat with another. George Washington warned about a two-party system driven by revenge. Any change has to be constructive.
Exactly. So let's shift to that. We've seen the symptoms, we've looked at the options. Let's talk about the constructive roadmap, the nonviolent path.
This is where organizational psychology becomes absolutely crucial. The sources emphasize a core principle. Lasting change requires fundamentally altering the cultural and social group structures and systems.
Not just the individuals.
Trying to change individuals in isolation is often futile.
That's a huge insight. It's like trying to get fit in a system that rewards you for eating junk food and sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
You can change one person's mindset, but if the whole system is pushing them the other way, they're probably going to fail.
The system has to align. That's why the prescription is a whole system approach. All the components of an organization or a society have to be defined, aligned, integrated, and implemented together, holistically.
Okay, so what does this whole system approach actually look like? When you're trying to bridge these huge societal divides, where do you even start?
You start at the very top with three foundational building blocks. And the first, the most important, is the vision.
Okay, let's unpack that. What makes a vision powerful enough to bridge deep divides?
It has to be an inspirational ultimate purpose, something far greater than oneself or one's own subgroup. A successful vision promises a mutual benefit, something like make the world a better place through our contribution to a sustainable, unified future.
It has to be something you can share with your political opponent because it's bigger than both of you.
That's the North Star. Next up is the mission.
Which is the how.
Exactly. The mission is the compelling statement of how that vision gets achieved, based on stakeholder needs. For example, we will be a leading provider of educational services and civic institutions that foster shared factual understanding. It grounds the vision in action.
And finally, values. The core beliefs, the guiding principles. And these can't just be posters on a wall.
No, they have to be actionable and universally agreed upon. And in our era, this is where the rubber meets the road. A necessary value today has to be integrity, meaning we will place science, facts, and truth above partisan ideologies.
Even when those facts are inconvenient.
Especially then, these values define what's acceptable and what's not within the new shared system. So that very first step in any revolutionary nonviolent change is creating that inspiring shared vision.
A perspective of mutual benefit powerful enough to make people forget their differences, even for a moment, and work toward a transcendent goal.
And that brings us to the close of our deep dive today. The roadmap is complex. It requires stepping out of that evolutionary mindset. It's not paved with simple fixes. It's foundational work.
A compelling vision, an actionable mission, and non-negotiable guiding principles.
Right. The challenges are significant.
The complexity of our current state, the divisions, the chaos, it can make this kind of change feel impossible, like a pipe dream. But the sources provide the blueprint. They show us that the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we have the power to create.
And the historical models really reinforce that. The American Revolution, it achieved profound political change, but the sources note that the evolutionary approach that came after, the patient systematic building of institutions based on that new vision, that was critical. So if we are in that universal state, we have to ask a hard question. Are our current systems and structures designed to support the evolutionary changes we need for unity? Or are we structurally locked into a path of disintegration? What immediate steps can you take to demand this kind of foundational alignment, a clear vision, mission, and values in your own local community or organization? That's the work that starts today.